All right, hello everybody, and welcome to an episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. And for my very special guest today, I will be chatting with Jake from the channel Nerd Level Rising. Hello, Jake. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for having. This is a very special occasion for me. I have been a massive DDF fan for a long time. My girlfriend can attest that when I started my channel, I was like, "There's a few channels, there's a few of these interview talk show things that I really want to do." And this is one of them. So this is
Oh,
an
your
honor
poor.
and privilege to be here.
Oh, well, likewise for me to have you, but your poor girlfriend, if she had to hear all these episodes.
She's endured quite a few ramblings of mine about books or booktubers or whatever, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Well, I think a lot of our significant others, our spouses, our partners, or what have you, the partner of a booktuber, they should have I think a support group or something
they
like that,
should.
you know?
They should because it's the conversations that they don't care. Like she doesn't read, right? So like
Uh-huh.
she's supportive, but she doesn't really, and then it's all the time of recording stuff,
Yeah.
So you're right. They should have something.
Yeah. I'm sure they would have stories to trade, no doubt about it.
I'm sure. I'm
About
sure.
our being such weird, obsessive people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Focused. We're very focused people, right?
Yes, of course. I mean, if you can sit there for an hour or two and just read a book, that requires a lot of people don't have that attention span nowadays.
Nowadays,
So,
especially, yeah, it's really something. I mean, I've talked a lot about this on the channel and with my students, about uh, the state of literacy, and we've all heard those latest statistics about literacy levels
yeah,
in the United States being as low as they are, with 54% of American adults reading below a sixth grade reading level, and 21% being actually illiterate, which is, I feel, a real crisis. It's a real shame. And I feel for those people because there are all kinds of disadvantages, not just not being able to read, but there are lots of really economic disadvantages that come with that. And
absolutely.
it's a shame that
Yeah,
we can't, as an educator, I feel that, gosh, we should be doing better than this.
yeah, absolutely.
We're up against some very difficult, circumstances in that. So I don't entirely blame people if we're not reading. There's a lot of
Sure.
competition out there. There's video games and the
Yeah,
internet in general, and TV and movies and everything else. And it's a changing world in many ways. But people are less literate by and large than they used to be.
yeah,
Which doesn't seem like progress to me, but yeah.
yeah. Actually, if you don't mind, I have a question about so like as an educator, how have you seen that like shift over time in in your classes? Because I remember during high school, things were starting to shift a little bit that people were like teachers had to be like, "Hey, put your phone away," which
Oh,
was like sort of the new thing, right? And then I get
yeah.
into my undergrad, and that's even more so. And now I'm 4 years into grad school where I'm so secluded with just my lab. I don't really,
Yeah.
have that environment anymore. So, how have you seen that kind of? Is that an issue for you in your classes where you really have to deal with this?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I still have very bright students, and I have students who are passionate about stories and literature and that sort of thing. And not that my students who are not interested in stories and literature aren't intelligent. They are intelligent in their own ways, but I think you will find a lot of us being educators, who will say that a lot of this stuff was happening before the pandemic. We were heading in this direction, but the pandemic really
Mm.
produce a drastic increase in the ways in which I personally feel a lot of my students are unprepared to engage with reading stories, with the critical thinking involved, with the sustained focus that you just alluded to a moment ago. I think that pandemic really had a major effect on a lot of young people's minds, and in terms of their expectations or lack thereof when it comes to their education, unfortunately. And they're just as
Yeah,
bright as any previous generation, but there's um, a degree to which they are just woefully unprepared
Mm,
for reading, for engaging in a discussion for an hour. That's
yeah.
a real difficult thing for a lot of people now. To be present and engaged in a discussion about something for an hour is a real challenge for a lot of them. And I feel that if I were to propose getting rid of their phones, it would be I get this about the same level of reaction that you would get if I said I'm going to cut off your arm. It's really it's
Wow. Yeah.
it is I'm not exaggerating. I think that a lot of them feel that attached,
Hmm.
that dependent on their phones, which is and I look, I'm on YouTube. I putter around on Twitter and Blue Sky, and so I'm way more present on the internet than I ever thought I would be. And I can feel myself sometimes reaching for the phone to see, oh, do I have a notification or
Sure.
how many likes do I have on this video or whatever. So
Yeah.
I'm totally susceptible to this too. But I grew up in the 1970s and 1980s, and my brain was not formed by the internet in ways that younger people today are. It's just their whole like a big chunk of their lives probably it feels like it's lived through the internet,
Yeah.
which is for better or worse, I don't know how
True.
you feel. You're younger than I am, so I don't know how you feel about. I mean, you're basically you grew up with the internet, right? I mean, that's just
Sort of. Yeah. I think my girlfriend and I actually talk about this quite a bit because she sees a lot of the same thing too, and it's like we both are just so grateful that we were born when we were. That we both are in our early 30s. I'm 31, she's 32,
yeah,
and so we both like we had as a very young child the social interaction.
right,
Internet was like starting, but it wasn't like nothing like it is now, right? Social media wasn't a thing. We didn't all have a computer in our pocket. It was very, very little. And then as those tools became more and more available, we were getting older and maturing and things like that to where we can have it and enjoy it and but still have a boundary there. Of course, there's a spectrum of how strong that boundary can be, and um, we're susceptible. Sometimes I'll find myself just mindlessly scrolling Instagram or whatever, and I'm just like, dude, look, what are you doing?
yep,
But it's funny. It feels like it's kind of almost like a sweet spot of being born in a time where we can sort of grow up learning the technology without having it so ingrained in our brains
uh-huh,
where I see people, the class that I teach, for example, for my PhD is like,
yeah,
they're 20-year-olds for the on average, and it's just like you were born in 2004, like that's weird.
yeah,
And they've always had an iPad, they've always had all this stuff, they've always been on social media, they've always done things that way. And the like you're saying, the social interaction stuff, the ability to just have a conversation,
yeah,
not the same. Of course, not for everybody,
right.
but generally speaking, it feels like it's just it's different, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, someone that age could easily make fun, and my daughters do make fun of me for, it's like
Sure.
this grandpa on this thing, which I know like maybe 1% or less of
Yeah.
the functions of this thing.
Hey, I'm not too far ahead of you there.
So they have a kind of literacy that I lack, that's for sure.
Sure.
But it feels, I don't know about this trade-off.
It's odd, or even like AI, right? Like it's not
Yeah,
entirely bad. There's skills that people, you even the more simple like chat gpt, for example, right?
yep,
That it's such an immediate way to get information that took me growing up a lot longer google searching and sorting through articles or whatever,
yeah.
or
I didn't
previous
have, there was
generation.
no internet when I was,
Yeah,
yeah,
you go to the library or you go find somebody to ask or whatever.
right.
And like that's amazing. And I think some of the skills that people have, I think about something like graphic design or something like that,
Yeah,
that there's a really awesome skill set with a lot of these new technologies. But at the same time, it's not all amazing either. So it's such an interesting push and pull with a lot of that.
Yeah, I have very deep feelings about AI,
Mm.
actually. And I talked about this a little bit with Bridget in the last episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy, but it's a topic that I feel like needs to be talked about a lot more because I just see people, a lot of people, with the exception of many people I know as an author, and I know many artists, and they have a deep sort of like, no, this is not good. What we're just, it feels to me like the majority of people are just frolicking into this whole AI world
Yeah,
as if it's the greatest thing ever. And oh, look, I can have an AI make a picture of me as if I'm a cowboy, or oh, I
right.
can be as an astronaut, or and okay, it's fun in a way, I guess. But can we think about this a little
Yeah,
before we just leap into this brave
yeah.
new world? Because
They haven't read books. That's why, right? They haven't read that
maybe,
story.
yeah, I guess.
Yeah,
But I feel like at the very least, we should be deeply concerned about the possibility that, look, and artists would feel this deeply. They were like the first wave, more than even writers, and now rewriters are like started waking up a little bit. A
Mhm.
lot of people who are writers are now realizing, oh, AI can basically do what I've taken years to do in like a second. And the artists had to deal with this first, because AI art was and there were people claiming that, oh, I can now be an artist because I can tell the AI to make a piece of art. And I'm sorry, but I have no tolerance for
I agree.
that
I agree.
particular viewpoint. And
Yeah,
sort of I guess they were framing it as sort of an anti-elitist sort of, oh, anyone can be an artist now, isn't it so great? Well, no, the people who are artists, it's not like they were given that as some privilege. They had to work really hard to
yeah,
become artists. And the actual deep worry that I have is that we're losing something that is vital to our humanity, which is the act of creating.
yes,
It's for me, the journey of being a writer is as much about the eventual destination, which was to publish my books and have people read them, as it is about the process of the creative process of writing. That's irreplaceable. That has, I feel that even just during the process, I'm in this place. It's an act of meditation. It's an act of improving my mind. It's an act of being at a level of awareness that I'm not normally at. But when I'm engaged in that, when I'm immersed in that world creation and story and that creativity that is bringing my mind to beautiful places, if we have AI doing that all for us, then we're going to lose that. And I think the same is true of artists. There is something beautiful about the very act of creation done by a human
yeah,
that is part of the value of art and literature and just the engaging in that creative process. And how can we compete with AI? I know a lot of people who are writers who will say, I will never read an AI novel, or people who support artists who don't want to have anything to do with AI art. But I feel like most people don't care. And maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to be wrong about that, but my guess is that most people actually just don't care. As long as they're entertained, that's all they really care about.
yeah,
What do you think about all that?
yeah. No, I completely agree. I think that the I love what you said about the process itself of creating being like really that's the most special part, I think,
I
and
think so
that's
too.
yeah, I completely agree. I've had that with, my small limited exposure to writing myself. I've had that with, for my job, there's some artistic creative components to it that like those are the most fun aspects of it. I used to draw and paint a lot growing up.
Hmm.
That is so, and it's the flow state. It feels like you like ascend to a different plane for that short time,
Right.
and it's beautiful, and then when you're consuming art or appreciating art, you're seeing, of course, the finished product, but like, you like I reading The Prophet of Edan, and I'm like, wow, like the work and the dreaming and the refinement and the draft after draft and the editing and the the
Hmm.
art that went into creating this thing, like you appreciate that just as much, or a painting, right? The time and the work that went into creating this painting or this piece of music or whatever. And I think there's such there's so much space for a much deeper appreciation than just the finished product. That if it's
Hmm.
made by AI, like we don't get that. So then the art is just not as cool anyway, in and of
It feels
itself.
empty to me. It feels
Yeah,
empty.
and it can look cool, right? It can be a beautiful
Yeah.
whatever it is, but you're right. It feels very shallow.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. And there are arguments on the other side, I guess. But I feel like we should be hitting the brakes a lot harder right now on this whole AI business. I know it's useful. I know I probably am using AI sometimes when I'm not even
Sure.
realizing it on my
Yeah.
phone, or on the internet or whatever. But and I'm not going to say it's totally like evil or something like that. But I think we should be thinking seriously about what we're giving up if we're leaping into this whole, you know, brave new world, you know.
Yeah, exactly. How many sci-fi books have that was the reason that we're now a dystopian whatever, right? The AI
Yeah.
took over, became sentient. That's why I always say thank you at the end of my exchanges with ChatGPT. I want it to remember I was one of the nice ones. Don't enslave me.
Oh,
But
I'm
yeah.
dead meat then. I'm
Oh man.
yeah,
Yeah, you got to be
yeah,
careful. You never know. You never know.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's strange. But yeah, and who knows, maybe AI will get to a point where it's sort of like sentient even and will it have feelings and will it feel bad about that mean guy Philip Chase talking
Right.
saying things about it uh, I don't know. But
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? I do, outside of the creative artistic sphere, I've certainly found good uses for it in terms of, I'm working on a project for my PhD that I need to understand the statistical approach that this paper took. You can literally
right.
copy and paste in what they did, ask it to explain it step by step, and it will do that.
Yeah.
Or coding, for example, or, um, even something like I was recently working on a website where I had like these thoughts and these words I wanted to use and this feeling I wanted to convey, and like I had all the pieces, I just couldn't quite mesh it together eloquently. So you can go into Chat GPT and say like, hey, like type in all the stuff you're thinking about and say, please help me brainstorm ways to concisely say these things. And it will
Uh-huh.
give you a bunch of options, and you can then take those as a running off point to say, like, oh, okay, I like this, I like that, I like that. Now I have this idea of my own on how to say what I wanted to say.
Right.
Things like that, I think, are totally fine. Um, but like, it's hard to limit it to that, right? Like, people are just going
That's
to
the issue.
run endlessly. Yeah.
That's the problem. So with my students, obviously there's a humongous temptation to have ChatGPT write their papers for them.
Yes.
And the thing is, when you let it through the door and you say, well, you can use it for this to improve
Mm.
your, whatever, help you with your commas or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
that's not what they hear. All they hear is,
Mm.
you can use ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And then you get a whole essay, basically spewed out by ChatGPT, which is not helping the student learn anything at
No.
all.
Yeah.
Unless our goal is to teach our students how to enter prompts into ChatGPT. I don't think we're accomplishing something good there.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. And hopefully the students who like the ones who really care about the learning process aren't going to do that. But unfortunately, that seems to be a smaller and smaller
That's a
percentage of the
small
population.
percentage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the ones who do care, there's so much pressure on them and there's so much stress, and they're like, how can I get a shortcut?
Yeah.
How can I get through this without losing my sanity? I guess I'll just go to GPT, and so yeah, it's
Tough
tempting.
one.
I understand. It's tempting.
Sure.
Uh, that's why I do a lot. I'm a dinosaur. I have my students write a lot of in-class essays nowadays. I've done it
Nice.
over the
Yeah.
years, but I know what I'm getting from them when they write an in-class essay is their actual writing.
Yeah.
I can't be sure anymore if it's a take-home essay in many cases. So.
Mhm. Yeah. For sure. That's a good way to do it.
I mean, it's working. And actually, the one advantage that even my students will acknowledge is that uh, they can't procrastinate when they have to do it in class.
Yeah.
it's not a take-home assignment that they just wait too long to start and don't have on time. It's done.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, you're reading. You are bucking the trend as podcasts are, and you're actually reading books and a
Yeah.
very thick book, I think, at the moment, a very large book.
It might be the largest book I've ever read. I do believe. Uh, I think it's almost 1,400 pages on a hardcover, I
Good
believe.
grief!
Yeah,
Wow.
it's a lot. I saw the audiobook is like 63 hours long or something ridiculous. Yeah,
Whoa. Okay.
shocking.
Wind and Truth.
Wind
So
and Truth.
yeah, we talked a little bit about this before I hit record, but I'm not reading it along with everyone else yet. I will eventually get to it because I am definitely someone who wants to know what's going on in the genre fantasy, and Brandon Sanderson is immensely influential in the genre. And obviously, I mean, we're at a place now where it feels like the whole world is
Yeah.
right now it's celebrating the release of this book that
Mhm.
I am looking forward to reading it. But no, you've actually started it, is that right?
I'm not very far. I think I'm maybe 75 pages in or something like
Yeah.
that.
By the time this
It
video comes out, you'll be much further in.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it showed up at my house right before we had dinner plans last night with a group of friends. It
Have you
showed up
canceled your
right.
dinner plans?
Yes, no. I had to be an adult and say, okay, I will put this down on the desk for now. We'll go have dinner. And then I did
Were
read
you
the
thinking
prologue
about Wind
when
and
we got
Truth the
back.
entire time?
Oh man, yeah, I was this I honestly was. I'm not joking. This Stormlight Archive in particular means the world to me,
Yeah.
because of the characters and the that journey has just been so immensely personal for me that I cannot describe how much I've been looking forward to this. But like, I almost don't want to read it because I'm that excited for it. If that makes any sense, I don't want it to be over.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking about it the whole time, and we got home and it was late, and I should have gone to bed, but I was like, I'll just read the prologue. So
Sure,
yeah,
sure.
which
Yeah.
I did. I stopped after the prologue.
Okay, okay.
I was because I needed to absorb what happened. The prologue, Sanderson does a very unique thing with the prologue in
I
the
know. Yeah,
Stormlight
you
Archive,
know what
right?
happens in the prologue, but you don't know the perspective you're going to get on
Yes,
it. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the way that this prologue has happened is, I'll just say, very interesting.
Okay.
And so it was nice to kind of pause for a second and let it absorb and come back this morning. I usually read like first thing in the morning. Otherwise, I get too busy and it just doesn't happen. But so that was nice to sleep on it, come back fresh this morning, and get a little bit more done. And after we are done on this call, I'll probably read a tiny bit more because it's right there. I can see it. It's staring at me.
Oh, it's
So
tempting you,
it is. It
pulling
is.
you toward it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm happy for everybody who's enjoying that right now. And that's fantastic. I'll get to it eventually so I can talk to the rest of you so you won't shun me too much.
No,
So
of course not. Of course, it'll be there, man.
yeah.
That's what I've talked to actually quite a few people on Instagram primarily, just people or in YouTube comments of like, hey, I haven't started my Stormlight journey yet, but whatever, and I feel left out, and it's gonna be there. It's
That's a good thing about books. Yeah.
yeah, it's not going away. And for me, I'm terrified of spoilers, so
Oh, really?
that's part
Okay.
of it. But it's it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
It'll always be there. Even like you can there's a lot of I want to read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn next year. How long has that been out, right? Like there's no reason to feel super I have to do this right now.
Yeah.
Especially if you're
That's a
I
great
tried
choice.
yeah, like I tried to read The Road before this book came out, right?
Yes.
And it wasn't the right time. I had to put it down. I was like, this just isn't hitting me, and I know it's going to be amazing. It's just not the right time. Um, but it's going to be there. There's no reason to feel weird
It's
about it.
funny because I saw on your channel when you were talking about reading The Road, and I left a comment
Hmm.
saying, "Yeah, that's the only book I've read by McCarthy. It's very bleak. It's a very difficult journey in many ways, but there's some heart to it, as well. I think you're going to get a lot out of it." And then I read some of the other comments, and you had replied to someone else basically saying, "Yeah, I gave up." And I was like, "Oops."
I like the bleakness though. Like I
Yeah.
like. I liked everything about it. It's just the writing style itself
Yeah.
was just not gelling with me.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of like how the Witcher books were when I tried to do those. It was very similar that the style
Uh-huh.
itself was just kind of like this just isn't for me right now.
With those, I do feel that we're losing a lot in translation.
That's what Vera says. Yeah,
Yeah, I believe Vera on that.
I do too.
Enough people who can read Polish gush about those books so much that I have to think we're missing something
Hmm.
in the English translation there. We get maybe hints of it, but
Yeah.
and that's that's too bad. But yeah, so you are reading The Big Wind and Truth, and this will be the conclusion of the first arc of the Stormlight Archive, and then there'll be the plan is five more books for the second arc in this,
Yeah.
which I guess there's going to be like a big time skip between the two arcs. Is that the
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah. I think it's not like there will still be characters from the first arc. Like it's not like, hundreds of years or anything like that.
Uh-huh.
But long enough that like some of the younger characters will be aged up and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Cool.
but it sounds like we're not getting Stormlight 6 for another, 8+ years or something. So we got a
Wow. Okay.
little bit of time. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure Brandon Sanderson will be writing something else in the meantime.
Oh,
So,
for sure, for sure. He's got the rest of his career mapped out on his website,
are you
as he
serious?
would. Oh yeah, 100%.
Wow.
He's ETA 2026 is this book, 2027 is this book, all the way through the end of the
Man.
Cosmere. It's
Well, no wonder
unbelievable.
his fans love him. Yeah. And the thing is, he will probably stick to that schedule.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah, probably.
Good grief. Okay. Well, I'm not jealous.
Well, it's probably a little bit easier for him, right? Just being able to have that be the only thing that he needs to be concerned with career. Well, not the
Yeah.
only thing. I mean, trying to get adaptations made and whatnot, but he
Yeah.
doesn't have to, do lesson planning and grade and do all that extra
He doesn't have to
stuff.
grade essays.
Yeah.
He has an army of helpers and assistants
Yeah.
and everything else. I mean, kudos to him. He's had the success, so good for him, you
Sure.
know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. The huge team probably helps.
yeah, I mean, to do the stuff that, would otherwise take a good chunk of your time,
Yeah.
from the little things like, one person hands you the book to sign and you just do
Uh-huh.
this. Another person takes it away, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't have that. I have to
No.
pick up the book myself and sign it and put it on a pile. And
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah. It's
he has
crazy.
to sign a few more books than I do, though.
Yeah. Just a few. Just a few.
So, well, that's
It's
cool.
crazy.
So, Sanderson was well, let's get into this because I want to hear about your reading journey. And at some point, obviously, you picked up Brandon Sanderson, but maybe there were other authors that came first. A lot of my guests here on Dear Dr. Fantasy have told me that Mistborn particularly was a sort of a gateway for them back
Hmm.
into reading, not just into fantasy, but into reading.
Yeah.
But I'd love to get your story about how you became a reader. What are some of the formative experiences of your life in terms of your reading, and what are some of the books that could explain who you are, going on the premise that you are what you read, Jake?
Yeah. Yeah. This is so fun. This is like one of my favorite parts of your show. You learn so much about the guests when they go through this stuff. So,
Yeah.
for me, when I was very, very, really little kid, I remember always seeing my mom have a book, and she read a lot of like Stephen King and like thrillers and crime stuff, and there wasn't really fantasy, but she was always reading. And there was a library, I don't know, a 2 or 3 minute drive from our house growing up, that we used to go there all the time, and I would get the little dinosaur books or whatever, and that's kind of so books have always kind of been there. My dad would read to me before we went to sleep, and it was just always sort of a part of what we did. And then I get old enough to where it's not the little dinosaur picture books anymore. I can actually start to my dad started to read a series of unfortunate events to us before
Huh.
bed,
Yeah.
to my brother and I, and those were so fun. I mean, they're so whimsical, and but they're still great stories at the end of the day too. And I feel like that was a piece that always kind of stuck with me. I actually reread those in my, I think I was maybe early 20s. I actually reread them, and they were still really fun, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but it kind of started with that. And then I get to a point, I remember being in maybe third grade, something like that, and finding the Artemis Fowl books.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and those were so, I loved those. I still have them on my shelf, the same copies I was reading then.
Wow.
And they were so fun. And I actually recently found out there's more books in the series from what I had read. So I'm like, I want to go back and reread those and finish, find the ending.
Oh, that's cool.
Um, yeah, I think that'd be really fun. But it was those, it was Narnia,
Uh-huh.
and that's kind of what I guess started to open my mind a little bit. Like, oh, here's this science fiction thing, here's this fantasy thing. And I didn't really think about it in terms of genre. It was just a fun story. But in hindsight, I can see that those seeds were kind of getting planted. And then, I'm doing those, and then I found the
And you
Pendragon.
also watching an anime at this time?
I was. I
Yeah.
was. That's actually one of my earliest memories is seeing Dragon Ball Z on a TV in a hotel. I
Yeah.
remember waking up and the TV was on, and it was just one of the characters that for those that know, it was Zarbon in his monster form. Okay, but he and it scared me. I remember that vividly, and then I was so scared of the show, and then I found it again a few weeks later, and I was like, oh, this isn't scary. This is great.
Okay.
And so I got really sucked into. I didn't even know of it as anime at the time. It was just a TV show, but Pokemon and all of those kind of geared towards a younger audience shows, and then some shows that were maybe not as geared towards a younger audience that I was watching a little bit earlier than I maybe should have been, but I think I turned out okay nonetheless.
Yep.
But yeah, so that's kind of happening at the same time here too, which is just another form of story, right? And I'm seeing those things. I find the Pendragon books by DJ McHale
Okay.
that that was another big push of like this is a big series. This is kind of blending sci-fi and fantasy stuff, and I'm noticing that I really like this multiple like these different worlds, and we're kind of following all these different characters, and there's this big sprawling story, but each book has its own story. Like I'm just starting to see some of these things that I like. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, this is cool. This is cool. And then I find Harry Potter.
Okay. I was
And
waiting
this
for Harry Potter.
Harry
Yeah.
Potter is
You're
the
the
thing.
age. You're the
Yeah.
age. Yeah.
Harry Potter is the thing. And I started with the movies, and I remember watching the movies, and Philip, I cannot tell you how terrified of Voldemort I was. I was so deathly afraid. Um, like nightmares all the time. I couldn't go outside if it was dark. I couldn't
Oh,
go into a dark room by myself. It was
oh,
bad.
no.
And the same thing happened with Gollum when I saw the Lord of the Rings movies.
Oh, yeah.
So
We were
I was,
also very young when that first one came out, and
yeah,
yeah,
it was what, like 2001 or something like that.
2001. Yeah.
So I would have been what, 8. Um, and then,
My older daughter was 4, and I actually dragged her to the theater to watch it.
okay,
Very stupid looking back. Like, what was I thinking?
that's amazing.
And she will tell me one of her, complaints about my parenting is that I traumatized her by showing her Fellowship of the Ring when she
Oh
was,
no.
yeah, oops.
Oh man. But she's become a fantasy reader too, right? Like this is the same daughter who's been on your channel before.
She's been on my channel. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
She will
That's
read
awesome.
fantasy among other things. Yeah,
That's very cool.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I find Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, I suppose, but Harry Potter was the one that really put its claws into me very deeply.
yeah.
Because I was so scared, but I also couldn't stop watching it. It was a really weird thing.
Uh-huh.
And I remember when the fourth movie came out, which I don't remember what year that was,
Fourth
mid
Harry Potter
2010s or
movie.
something.
Yeah.
That's where I got
Oh,
really
that's where
scared,
it
right?
gets
Because
really
that's
scary. Yeah.
yeah. And I was also of an age at the time that I was like the same age as Harry would be in the movies, right?
Oh,
Very
yeah.
close to it. And I kind of looked like him a little bit. I
Huh.
wore glasses. I have contacts now, but I wore glasses. My hair was very similar to his. Like, people would tell me constantly that I look like Harry Potter. And so I would have dreams that
Wow.
Voldemort's trying to kill me and all this stuff. So we're getting to this point, and I'm like, okay, I'm so scared of this thing, but I love it. what if like I would love to conquer this fear, you know? So I was like, let me check out the books.
Okay.
And so I finally crack open that book, and obviously it's such a magical, and like there's magic is the only word I can think of to describe Harry Potter, right? Which is
Mhm.
so on the nose, but also so like transcendent of the story itself, at least for me.
Yeah.
And it just it swept me away completely. And through the process of reading the books and seeing the later movies and everything, like I conquered the fear.
Hmm.
And I think that experience also, on top of just how much I love the story, just like that is in my heart and soul, Harry Potter. And
Wow.
I don't think it'll ever, I hope it never goes away. But
No,
I
it will
don't think it
always,
will.
no matter what, it's part of who you are now, and
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
formative thing for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
A very deep effect on you. Yeah.
yes, very, very. So that was, if there's a single story that has impacted me more than anything else, it's that.
Wow.
Um,
Huh.
in fact, so much so that I got in a cycle where I would read the series once the last book came out. I read that, and then I would just start over on the Sorcerer's Stone and read through everything, and then start over and read through everything, start over. I probably did that 5 or 6 times in a row.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, which in hindsight, I'm like, man, there's so much other stuff that you could read, but I was just so hooked, and that really carried me through for a long time through high school. Even immediately after high school, and then at that time, the Game of Thrones TV show had started to air, and I was a really
Okay.
big fan.
Okay.
And I was like, well, there's books. This is based on books. Let me check those out.
Yeah.
And I was working at Target at the time, and we had the mass market paperbacks, the same ones that are on my shelf.
Yeah.
And
I had
I,
probably. Yeah.
yeah, I was
Right
like, it's
behind you
eight.
here too.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. They're $8 or whatever. I get my discount for working there. Let me just grab them real quick.
Yep.
So I grabbed them and started reading those. Was the same way, just utterly blown away. And I think Song of Ice and Fire is the thing that I would credit as what turned me into an adult reader.
Okay. Okay.
That has made me see that, like, oh, there's other things than Harry Potter that are amazing, and it's so different. And it made me
Yeah, there's
curious
a
on what else
slight
is out there.
contrast there between
A little
Harry
bit,
Potter and
yeah.
Song of Ice and Fire. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just made me so curious, and it made me just start to wonder what else is out there. And so I think that's the thing that took me from being somebody who I read a lot as a kid, but then like most people, through high school, I slowed down quite a bit. I was just rereading Harry Potter and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
then I found Song of Ice and Fire. That really started the train moving. And then I got on Google and I was like, man, like what else? Similar series to Game of Thrones, whatever. And I'm
Okay.
looking through these lists, and number one on all the lists is The Wheel of Time.
Aha.
Always number one.
Yeah.
Like, okay, okay, I'll check that out. And that's when everything exploded. The Wheel of Time was still is to this day one of my favorite series, one of the most satisfying endings I've ever experienced.
And your first time
And
reading Brandon Sanderson, I guess.
it was in fact, yes.
Last three books. Yeah.
Yep. So that was a huge series for me, and made me appreciate the catharsis of an amazing ending to a long epic series.
Aha.
Um, it made me appreciate just the depth and the we talked about this a little bit, that everyone talks about the slog and how there's these 3 or 4 books in the middle that are
I didn't know
horrible and
about the
boring.
slog, and I didn't
Me
feel it.
either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, these are great. Are they
Yeah.
my favorite books in the series? Maybe not, but they're still great. I don't know. So yeah, I had a great time. I read the whole series straight through. I didn't take a break for anything else,
Yeah.
and it took me a long time to get through them. But what's the rush? And I loved it. And it just really made me like, okay, this is who I am, right? Like I am a reader, and this is just a big part of my identity at this point now.
Yeah.
And so then and like you said, that was my first exposure to Sanderson. I was like, okay, well, I love what Robert Jordan was doing, and I was scared. Like, who is this dude who's just like, come on, can he actually end this thing well or whatever?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I
lo
mean,
and
this is what
behold,
gave him his boost, really. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. And then that led me to, I was like, okay, well, let me try a Sanderson book. So I tried Mistborn and really liked that, and then started hopping around all over the place. And now we're at the point where, like most people on BookTube, I have all these, I'm reading 5 or 6 different series at a time or jumping around all over the place and whatnot. But yeah, I think, Harry Potter was the main one as a kid, but there were some other big series in there as well.
Mhm.
And then, we get into Song of Ice and Fire was the gateway, and then Wheel of Time is what really exploded everything outwards. And
Yeah, that contrast between Harry Potter and A Song of Ice and Fire is, as we were sort of jokingly saying, a pretty marked contrast.
yeah,
Reminds me of an occasion when this was many years ago, but J.K. Rowling put out a tweet about today's the anniversary of the Battle of Hogwarts, and I'll never get over the losses of that day or something like that. I can't remember exactly what she wrote, but
yeah.
George R. R. Martin replied to that tweet just saying, "Oh, you sweet summer child."
That's cute. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
That's
thought
so funny.
that was really funny. Um, so
Yeah, they're a bit different. They're a bit different.
yeah.
But both so wonderful at the same time.
Oh yeah,
That,
for
that's
what they're trying to do, that
yeah,
obviously both series have had a tremendous impact, and they're aiming for different targets, really.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think the listeners might notice that there's a glaring omission from my reading journey being Tolkien, that I have read Tolkien before anyone gets mad at me.
Uh-huh.
I think I very much want to reread it now that I have read more things, because at the time I think I had read it. It was between one of my Harry Potter rereads,
Okay.
and I'd seen the movies a bunch of times, and I wanted to read the books.
So are you
And
including The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, including The Hobbit as well. So I wanted to read them. I read all I guess all 4 of those sort of back to back, and I I did enjoy them. For the record, let it be known, I did really enjoy
Not
it.
your favorite thing.
It wasn't my favorite thing ever. I was like, yeah, I still kind of like the movies better.
Yep.
But I had read Pendragon and Harry Potter and things like that before, right? And so I think now that I'm much more well-rounded as a reader, not that I mean, there's tons and tons of things I haven't read, right? But I still feel like a beginner in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I've certainly read a lot more than I did at that time. So I would love to reread it with this new sort of mental framework and all the
Yeah.
context and things like that, and just the reading skill that I have now. I think I can pick up on a lot more
You've
now.
read some series, and you are reading some series that do require a different sense of pacing from
Hmm.
a lot of the stuff you mentioned already, which is all great stuff. I'm not knocking it, but um, you've read Malazan, the Malazan Book of the Fallen, at least I know, and you've got that under your belt,
Yep.
and you are going to be reading Wars of Light and Shadow.
Mhm.
These are series that require you to take your time in a way that many of the others that we've been talking about, which I love, but they are not quite as deliberate in their treatment of theme, let's say, or they're not
Yes.
as philosophical, not as deep. And so you are definitely, I think, at a point where if you did reread Lord of the Rings, I think you would be probably more sympathetic toward the pacing, which
Yeah.
I could understand when you're. This is very, very common. People who grew up with the movies trying to read the books are like, "Whoa, this is so much slower," And
Yeah.
I've even heard young people say the movies are too slow now. So it's just like, where
Wow.
are we?
That's
But
wild. Yeah.
but I do think a lot of our expectations about pacing have been informed by screen storytelling, and that's bled
Hmm.
over into books. So
Sure.
when you do encounter authors who want you to slow down and think about what you're reading a little bit more, it can be jarring. It can be like, wow, this is work. But you
Yeah.
get to a point where, and I've heard a lot of people say this too. Like at first, reading Lord of the Rings was just like a chore, but gradually I started to appreciate it and enjoy just steeping myself in this experience. And then
Yeah.
I finished it and I tried to read, X, whatever it might be, which is a more, fast paced, more according to people's expectations, perhaps now. And it felt too bare to me, so
Yeah.
it really is a matter of perspective, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's sort of been I think Malazan is the most formative story of like more the more recent part of my journey in
Uh-huh.
that I knew nothing about it before it was another one on the list of things similar to A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
So I was like, man, the Wheel of Time was great and it was super long, and but it wasn't intimidating. So okay, I'll jump in. And it's also a special memory for me. The Gardens of the Moon was when it was my first time on a plane in my entire life. It was October 2019, and was when I came down here to Florida to visit the grad school that I eventually went to.
Uh-huh.
And I was reading Gardens of the Moon on the plane because I was so scared of the plane. I wanted something to
Wow.
distract me. So of course I pick the nice, smooth, easy ride of Gardens of the Moon to carry me
With
through.
with early on, there are massive explosions
Yeah.
that, that won't remind you at all of what could happen to you on a
Of
flight.
course, flying objects. Um, but but yeah, so that memory is special to me also. But the what Malazan does, particularly with theme, that was, to be honest, lost on me for the first few books.
Uh-huh.
And it really wasn't until I got to Midnight Tides that I think was just, I don't know if I was more developed as a reader by then, or if it's just a bit more straightforward of a story in that one compared to the earlier books, or some combination, I'm sure. But also, when I was reading that was when I found the discussions that you and AP were doing for each
Uh-huh.
book,
Yeah.
and those I went back and watched the earlier ones as well, and I was like, wow, there's so much that I missed. This is crazy. But that
Uh-huh.
also prepared me to kind of keep my eyes out for those things moving forward. And the rest of that series was even more enriched because of it.
Hmm.
And so that has then caused me to, now everything that I read, I'm on the lookout for those things. And I get so
Mm.
much more depth out of it. And I find myself, the more I read, the more I'm seeking out an experience like that I got out of those, later Malazan books. Or
Yeah.
that's why I want to do the Wars of Light and Shadow. That's why I want to do Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and some of these series that are slower, of course, but they sort of need to be to explore those things more deeply, I
Yeah.
think.
Yep.
So I'm really excited about that, and I'm so grateful to Erickson and Esselmont both for what they did to really challenge me as a reader and make me
You
grow
have
in
read
that
the
way.
Esselmont books as well.
Yes, the six, the novels of the Last Empire. I haven't done the prequel stuff yet,
Okay. Okay.
um, but yeah, those were just uh, they were they're very challenging.
Hmm.
But I think now, like, if I was to go back or when I go back to reread it, which I certainly will at some point. I'm so excited to reread it and see everything I missed.
It's like, yeah, it's like reading a whole series for the first time, and because
Yeah.
all the new things you see. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it sounds amazing. But yeah, I think it'll be similar to going back to reread Lord of the Rings. I think that the
Uh-huh.
just my skill as a reader has increased so much, and I'm so excited to sort of put that to use in some of these series that we talked about this a bit when you were on my channel. Man, it feels like forever ago now. But
Yeah.
those stories that they're harder to get through in the moment, but they really stick with you so much longer.
Yes.
That, like, I find myself seeking that out so much more now than I used to.
Yep. Yeah, and one of those is probably going to be R. Scott Baker's the Second Apocalypse series, I'm sure, because I can see you chomping at the bit
Oh,
to
I
get
am.
that.
I
Yeah.
am. I just watched your weeks that were right before this call, and
Yeah.
hearing you talk about it, you know, it's just one of those things that I think it's that exact thing that I'm looking for, of it being so thought provoking, and there being so many layers to really explore,
Yeah.
even if the surface level isn't, this super fast paced, just fun Harry Potter kind of ride.
Nope.
It's got there's just it's not right, but there's just so much there to chew on, and really impact who you are as a person and how you view the world. I think
Yeah.
this has been a sort of recent realization of mine, when I got to talk to Christopher Rocchio on my channel,
Yeah.
and
And
which
I
was
know you're a
cool.
big
And
fan of the Sun Eater, right?
huge
Yeah.
fan, huge fan. And he's such an intelligent person,
Yeah.
and he just, like, casually tosses out this, well, why do we read? Well, it's to, expand your mind and learn who you are and formulate who you are in the world and how you view the world, because you see these different perspectives and you learn and you challenge yourself and all these things.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I've never thought of it that way. So that was such an eye-opening thing to now I find myself seeking that out, similar to the deep themes and all that. It's like the other side of that coin of seeking out these experiences to grow and appreciate the world and learn about myself. Uh,
Yeah.
all of those things. And it sounds like Baker's work will certainly
Oh,
make me do
it'll
that.
provoke
So
thought, that's for
yeah,
sure. You
I'm
may want
excited.
to read something happy, in between those books, but
Yeah.
it is the bleakest thing I've ever read. And I like Joe Abercrombie's First Law series.
Yeah.
I like Mark Lawrence's Broken Empire. I love them, actually. I think they're fantastic.
Mhm.
But in Abercrombie's case, I think in some ways Abercrombie's worldview in First Law is just as bleak as Baker's, but Abercrombie has that humor,
Yeah.
which is makes the difference. Not that there isn't any humor in Baker's series, but it's not the thing that it is, and it's not a feature really that you would
Sure.
need to remark too much on. So it's just so depressing. And, yeah, and he really engages in some very thought-provoking, elements of human nature. I mean, he is essentially positing, and this is not a secret or a spoiler in any way whatsoever, but he explores whether or not we have free will. And I think I'm not done. I have a book and a half left here in Second Apocalypse, so maybe he'll surprise me. But um, we don't have free will. And
Yeah.
it's just you are a product of your biology and all these social factors and everything else, and basically everything you do is determined by those things, and you don't really have much choice.
Yeah.
Uh, and there is this, the darkness that comes before is the first book, and when you read that book, you can figure out what he means by that. By the darkness that comes before, what comes before your actions, what comes before your being in the world is something you're not even aware of. It's behind you.
Mm.
It's controlling you. It is this vast thing that is controlling you, and you don't understand it. It's dark. You can't understand it. You can't
Yeah.
but it's there and it's pulling these strings and you're just like a puppet doing what it's telling
Yeah.
you to do essentially you know
That's so interesting. And there's extremely compelling arguments on that side, for
of
sure.
course. Oh my goodness. I mean,
Yeah.
I've read I mean, you're a more science person than I am really, but I read Joanna has read this as well. Robert Sapolsky's book Behave. He's a
Mm.
neuroscientist who talks
Yeah.
about, and he says there's no free will,
Yeah.
on his analysis of not just neuroscience, but he gets into other disciplines as well, like sociology and psychology. And there are people who critique his book on the basis of him not really being very deeply knowledgeable in those other fields.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's an interesting read. It really is.
Yeah. You said something in your video that posted today about sort of how you correct me if I'm, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how you at least choose to believe that we have free will because it makes you feel better, right? Or you at least see value in that argument.
I don't see any
Um,
choice except to act as if we have free will,
yes.
to live as if I have free will.
Hmm.
Because if I thought about my lack of free will all the time, it would be depressing and paralyzing. And
Yes.
I think there's something more, even if I'm deluding myself, and I'm open to the idea that I might be, but I also think I might not be. Maybe there is more. Maybe there is a spiritual level to existence that
Sure.
we can transcend our base nature and
Hmm.
become something better through compassion, through empathy. I want to believe that, and I'm going to
Yeah.
live my life as if that were true.
Yeah.
And for me, even if it's delusion, I feel like there's something heroic in
Yeah.
choosing to live as if you do have free will, even if you kind of suspect or fear that you don't. Heroic as in, hey, maybe I'm just doomed. Maybe I am a little slug that is just crawling its way and can only go in one direction. And maybe that's true and I can't see it. But I'm going to be the most heroic slug I can possibly be.
Yeah. I love that.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I really love that. I think and I agree too. There was a have you seen there's a movie called Prometheus that's in like the Alien universe.
I have not.
It's a great movie. but there's a trying to figure out how to navigate this spoiler free. There's a very so one the whole sort of idea, the premise of the movie, right, is this group of people are going out to find this planet that has alien life that they suspect may have played a role in sort of the creation of humanity. And so they're just going to explore this thing. And these scientists, are going to find our creators, essentially, is the goal they're setting out. And one of them is deeply religious.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, well, how does that work? Right? We're literally looking for evidence of the lack of need for your God. How can you still believe while you're searching for this?
Yeah.
And that's sort of something that they explore a bit through the movie. And there's a line that she says at one point in the movie that's she just says, "Well, this is what I choose to believe."
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And that to me, that
That's
just
faith.
I don't
That's what
know.
faith is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it is the definition of faith, right? And to me, that was just so beautiful, and that's really stuck with me. I can't even remember that movie came out in like 2012 or 2013 or something, and that just really stuck with me. And I think the same thing applies to the free will idea, right? That
Yeah.
you get one life. You can either, you sort of don't have full control over a whole lot of things, but one of the things you can control is, your attitude towards certain things,
Right.
and certainly not everything, but some things. And I think this is one where you can choose to believe you have free will, that might be comforting or make you feel a little bit better, or it's like religion, right? Like there's no hard proof of it usually. That's sort of the point.
Right.
But a lot of people find a great deal of comfort in choosing to believe it nonetheless, and I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
just the fact that they're better able to function in the world or feel that
yeah,
they feel they have meaning, which is very important if you're not going to be overwhelmed by depression and
mhm,
other things, to feel that what you do matters, that you have meaning, and
absolutely.
uh, that's what does it for you, then great,
Yeah,
I have no problems with that. But yeah, it's a fascinating journey, and I'm very glad that I'm reading R. Scott Baker. His books he's brilliant. He's a very gifted writer. But I do prefer a writer like Jenny Wirtz or Stephen
sure.
Erickson, who also have a lot of bleakness and pain and suffering in
Yeah,
their stories, but there's a counterbalance there of joy and beauty and wonder and
yeah,
meaning, and a lot of that happens in moments of connection and compassion. So I do have a preference in my storytelling for that vision, as opposed to we're fundamentally selfish and
yeah,
pre-programmed, and there's any little bit of struggle that you do to counter that is just futile,
yeah.
so,
I
uh,
suspect I will be the exact same. Just because of, like, I think about what makes me react really emotionally to stories, not just books, but just in general. And almost like I've certainly cried when something's really sad or really depressing or whatever, right? But it's pretty rare. Almost always when something has made me cry, it's because it's some just amazingly cathartic or hopeful or uplifting thing that has
yes,
happened in the
yeah,
midst of the bleakness. That,
yeah,
like, that's what really gets me. So I think that I'll probably have the same opinion as you.
yeah. No, I have not cried once, even though horrible things happen to the characters in the second apocalypse. Like,
Yeah.
not even close to it. Like, not a sniffle.
Yeah,
But yeah, Erickson and Wirtz, yeah, they can pull at you in those
mm,
ways.
yeah,
And
for
One
sure.
Piece too. Actually, I know
Yeah,
you're also you've read quite a few, probably more manga than I have. I suspect, but I've only read
actually,
One Piece is my sixth manga.
you
So
you probably have me beat, to be honest. I've been a big anime guy, but I haven't.
okay, okay,
Um, I've probably read. I don't know. If it's as many, it's certainly not more than you. I would say it's probably the same, or maybe less.
okay. So for
Um,
me, it's Vinland Saga and Vagabond and
mhm,
Monster and To Your Eternity and
yeah.
Descending Stories, and
Okay.
now
Yep.
One Piece.
You've done all the greatest hits. That's crazy. Except
Kind of. I
Berserk.
mean.
You got to do
Yeah,
Berserk at some point.
everyone tells me you need to read Berserk. I'll probably read Akira first and then read Berserk.
Nice.
That's my
Yeah,
plan, I think.
it's a good plan.
But you are now. Where are you in One Piece?
I just, as of yesterday, as I was waiting on Wind and Truth and the road didn't quite click with me, I was like, let me just read a little bit of One Piece. So I
Okay.
finished the Long Ring Long Land, which is hard to
Okay.
say.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
finished
Which is
that.
really goofy, uh,
Yeah.
but also has some really clever foreshadowing in it.
Yes. Where it left off, I think the character backstory I think I'm about to get, I'm so excited for.
Yeah.
I'm very excited for.
Yep. Yep. No, so you're about to read the Water 7 arc within the Water 7 saga. And
Yes.
the first time I bawled, now I did get emotional near the end. There's a certain Nami moment at the end of East Blue that did grab me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But the first time I really lost it is in Ennie's lobby. Uh,
Okay.
and that's following Water 7. So I'll be
Yeah.
curious to see what you think. That's where I've realized, okay, I get the emotional depth is here too. It's fun, it's goofy. There's some serious themes going on, but also there's this incredible emotional impact that this story can have at times. And
Yeah.
Penny's Lobby is where I really first saw
Okay.
that. So
That's exciting. Yeah, there was I actually didn't I got emotional but didn't actually like cry at the moment you're mentioning in the East Blue.
yeah.
The end of Arabasta got me though, for sure. There's that one
Uh-huh.
manga
Yes,
panel
yes,
towards
yes.
the
Yeah,
end that I was just like I was going strong and I was like, "Hey, I'm not, everyone says you're going to cry, I'm fine." And then it just got me.
yeah.
Uh so yeah, that's what made me buy in more and then loved Skypiea and I think what everyone's telling me about Water 7, I think this is it's gonna be even better. So I'm so excited.
Yeah, for me, where I am now, the two sagas that have hit hardest are Water 7 and the one I recently finished, the particularly the Marineford arc of the Summit War saga. Marineford and the post-war arc, actually, which is the
Okay.
last part of of the entire saga. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the halfway point. And
Jeez.
that one's big. I know, right?
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
At least the
That's
halfway point of where it is now, it's still going. So yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I when I started the manga, I was like, man, he's got to be ending this thing soon. I need to try to catch up.
Yeah.
But it seems like we got plenty of time.
I think we'll make it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that'll be and it'll be fun to talk. We have a new group to discuss One Piece with now. It sounds like with John and
Yeah.
Zach and others, right? So that'll be really fun.
Yeah. John is going to be trying it for the first time. Zach is a veteran,
Yeah.
and Andrew as well. I think
Yes, that's right, Andrew.
he's also a veteran of the series. So yeah,
That'll be fun.
it'll be fun. I am delightfully surprised at how much I'm loving One Piece myself.
Yeah,
Um,
that's awesome. I love
and-
that you're having so much fun with it. Yeah,
yeah.
it's really cool. Like as a growing up as such an anime person, and you get it's so funny now because anime is cool now. It's so mainstream now,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and like you have celebrities talking about it because it gets them more followers, and it blows my mind. Like
Yeah.
when I was growing up, it was still I was the weird kid because I had the anime T-shirt on,
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
so it's just so wildly different. But
I still haven't
I
seen much anime myself. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I'm pretty much a reader.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I think, but it's so cool for me to see, somebody coming from like just outside of the,
Totally outside.
weird anime manga people that, some people come in and appreciate how amazing these stories can really be.
Yeah.
It's so validating in a way also, right? Because I'm like, see, I wasn't weird. I was onto something that you guys are now just discovering is amazing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Definitely ahead of the curve for sure.
there you go.
Uh, yeah, and there's so much literary value, so much to explore, so much beautiful storytelling in manga in general, but tons of it in One Piece. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really happy to be starting this. Now, I wasn't a total stranger to this kind of storytelling in the sense that I grew up a comic book reader.
That's
I
right.
was huge into especially Marvel, but also DC when I was a
Yeah,
kid. So I collected comic books in the late 70s and the early to mid 80s was my comic book time. And I still
yeah,
have them. I still have those comics.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. That's
A lot
so
of
okay.
Spider-Man, a lot of X-Men, you know.
Okay, so you maybe you're a good person for me to. So I am very interested in getting into comics, but it's so overwhelming,
Oh
so
my goodness.
overwhelming.
Yeah.
Um, and for whatever reason, I feel particularly drawn to X-Men.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
do you have some sort of opinion on like a good starting point?
Wow. Huh.
The
Now,
reason I ask is my natural inclination is issue one and read everything in order. Like
yeah.
that's usually how I go. Okay, okay,
Yeah, totally. I would say why not? And the fact of the matter is, I don't know much about is X-Men still running? Even I don't even
I don't
know.
even know. Yeah,
But it makes sense to me to start with issue one. Yeah, and you see it evolve. Because by the time I got
yeah,
it in the late 70s, early 80s, it was different from
hmm
what had come before. It evolved, and then I occasionally, as late as the 90s, would take a peek, and it looked very different, in the 90s
sure,
from what I would had grown up with. But yeah, so my favorite era of the X-Men is when you had like Nightcrawler and
yeah.
Wolverine in there, and Nightcrawler was my favorite, by the way.
I love Nightcrawler. Yeah, he was awesome. I grew up with like the I remember seeing the '90s TV show, the cartoon, when I
Hmm.
was little, and then there was what is the I can't remember the company that made the movies with Hugh Jackman that started those. There was
Yeah,
a cartoon called X-Men Evolution that I really liked. So I grew up with the like I've always been really into the media overall, but I just never did the comics for whatever reason. But that group of people that those movies and shows focused on have always just been the that's like the quintessential X-Men to me anyway.
yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that appealed to me about the X-Men was there was this constant theme through the comic of these people were other, right? This is a world where being a mutant, not a good thing, right? People
Right.
were afraid of them just because of who they were. And yes, they have powers and people are afraid of something that could potentially be more powerful than them. There's that.
Yeah.
But the idea that this is a world where they are trying to be the best they can, but most people would automatically assume they're evil just because of who they are.
hmm
That was a that made that comic book series more interesting to me, I think, even as a
Yeah.
kid, that there was something beneath it that was being looked at in a way that's metaphorical, but applies to the real world, to our society, where we do have a lot of history of making certain groups of people into the other, the monsters, the
hmm
dangerous. So that was really cool, and I love Spider-Man as well because he always seemed to me like not that he was ordinary or anything like that, but he just seemed like a superhero that I could identify with more than,
Yeah.
say, like a Superman or something like that.
hmm
I loved his humor too,
Yeah.
cheesy humor that probably explains why I love dad jokes so much. But
Dad jokes are great.
yeah,
You're a dad. You can, you have the dad joke
I actually
card.
am licensed to tell dad jokes because I am
Indeed.
a dad. So yeah, yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
Um, the the theme of the other and sort of exploring that is something that I've noticed that pops up a lot in a lot of the stories that you seem to like the most.
yeah.
Um, do you think that that's just a coincidence? Just that that's such a prevalent thing in the real world that a lot of writers tend to explore that, or is that something that you find like really strikes a chord within you personally? Like it just
Yeah.
seems like such a through line.
It is something that strikes a chord in me, and I feel one of my deepest held beliefs is that we as a species have to learn to transcend our tribalism. It's a matter of life and death.
Mm,
That's how I feel. That if we do not learn to transcend our tribalism, we are doomed as a species. We are going to kill ourselves,
mm,
and that's it. So that's that hope that I was talking about earlier, as opposed to the darker view that we are incapable of transcending our tribalness because we are rigged to hate. We are rigged to be selfish. We are rigged to consider certain entities us and the rest of them outside that little circle is them. And them is bad, right?
Right.
Because we're good. And that dichotomy is just built into us from evolution or whatever initially maybe as a survival mechanism,
Sure.
but it's part of our destructiveness. I feel that we have to be able to transcend that and recognize ourselves not only in other people, not only in all other people, but in other creatures that we share this planet
Mm.
with. That we need to recognize all of life as being one. And until we're able to do that, we're going to be destroying things as we've done for our entire history. And I do feel that we are going to destroy ourselves if we cannot transcend our tendency to make others into the enemy, and instead of seeing ourselves in them. And it's series like Malazan and the Wars of Light and Shadow and Realm of the Elderlings. I would throw that in there as well. Realm of the Elderlings is just brilliant in this regard, that show us the connection that all of life has, that we're all here together, you know. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that that's something that definitely resonates with me on an individual level, but I feel like it's just maybe the most important thing that anyone can write about.
Yeah. That's beautifully said. Yeah.
It's also part of what I try to write about in the Adan trilogy,
Yeah,
really.
absolutely. Um, yeah, I love that. I think that this is is such a funny thing to say, or maybe it's weird to admit. I don't know. Um, th Though that's like an idea that I have. It's taken me longer than I'd like to admit for that idea to really take root in my brain.
Mhm.
Um, or even as silly as it sounds, like the importance of connection in general, let alone outside of the othering and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've sort of been, I have the workaholic genes in my bones, right? Like that is the one of the biggest. I love my dad to death, but that's one of the things he passed down to me, right?
Yep.
And so I was for so long through my most of my 20s, even it's really only been the last couple of years. I was so dead set on like career, build career, build career, build career,
Sure.
and only more recently, thanks to books, in part, but I think much larger part to my girlfriend for like really showing me like
Hmm.
connection with other people is the most important thing, and that's finally getting into this brain.
Yep.
And so uh, with that mindset, I go into these stories, or I hear you say that, or just hanging out with friends, or I had went to my dinner plans rather than sitting here and reading Wind and Truth, right? Like it
Yeah.
was just thinking about that, seeing the world in that way, has been sort of a more recent thing for me. As weird as that feels to say, but just being transparent, right? But that feels so profound and so important and so beautiful, and um, yeah. So I don't know. I agree. I resonate a lot with what you said, and I look forward to having that lens moving forward and continuing to reinforce or explore that, not even reinforce, but just explore that whole thought process, that mindset, et cetera, through, you know, life experiences in general, including these stories that can really get in there and, have such an impact.
Yeah. Yeah, they really can. They give us a vision, a vision of that gives us hope, I
Yeah.
think, that show us a path that we can take. And it seems to me that there could be something wonderful on the horizon if we're willing to go to that down that path.
Yeah. I think this is something that I think about pretty often the last few years is I think one of the things that I love most about reading, especially, I don't get it nearly to the same extent with other forms of storytelling or entertainment, but with reading especially, is really living somebody else's experience for a while.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
and I think that has made me just be more empathetic, appreciate other people's perspectives a lot more.
that's the heart
Um,
of it. Yep.
yeah, think about myself a lot more, understand myself better,
Hmm.
all of those things. And I think like that's really become one of my favorite things about books, and has become again, as little as I have done it, the little bit of writing that I have done it, it's already like I feel like I'm a different person in a different POV, like these things, and that's such a amazing experience.
Yeah.
I love that all this stuff can do that, and it kind of circles back to what we were talking about earlier about how this whole thing, it feels on, some people on the outside might look at it as a surface level, oh, you're just entertainment, whatever. Like it is so, as you said, transcendent through the human experience. It's amazing. It's been the most, I think, in some ways, the most educational thing I've ever done is opening a fantasy book about dragons or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. On
Yeah.
those words of wisdom, I don't think we can get better than that. So we're gonna conclude this episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy on those words of wisdom from Jake. But I do want to encourage everybody to check out Nerd Level Rising. It's a beautiful channel. There are wonderful things going on there. There's a growing, thriving community. And you get to hear this wonderful person talk about his reading experiences over there as well. So do check out Nerd Level Rising. And thank you so much, Jake, for being my guest today. I've enjoyed myself thoroughly talking with you.
Yeah. Oh, this is so much fun. Thank you so much for this. Anytime I get to talk to you, it is a absolute pleasure, and I always learn something, and all of those good things. So yeah, I can't thank you enough for not just this, but just for being so welcoming to me in the community, and you and others have really just embraced me from day one, and it's amazing. So yeah, thank you very much.
That's what it's all about, my friend.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for watching, and until next time.